Well, good morning to our American friends and good afternoon to all you folks in Israel, including our very, very distinguished professor and head of the Ministry of Diaspora. Voice for Israel is very proud to sponsor and to welcome this virtual return visit for you, Professor Nachman, to Durham. He has recently morphed from being a Duke professor to the position he now holds in the new Israeli government. We are also grateful for all the support of our co-sponsors and their help in distributing information about this program. They are listed in the flyer. You are automatically muted, but we want to handle as many of your questions as possible. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send your questions, and we are taping the program. So all of you who have registered will be able to receive that recording soon. Dr. Nachman Shai has devoted many years in the service of Israel and the strengthening of the relationship between the Jewish state and the Jewish people, including serving in the Knesset. He has become very knowledgeable about both our cultures. While there in the Knesset, he chaired the Caucus for strengthening the Jewish people. He became known widely in Israel as the Great Calmer during the rocket attacks from Iraq during the Gulf War, when he served as the IDF spokesman, holding the rank of brigadier general in the IDF. The number of other positions he has held in service to the truth about Israel is much too long to go through, but it is partially summarized in our announcement. Dr. Shai, Professor Shai, thank you, welcome. It is so good to see you again. And Bethel Synagogue's Rabbi Daniel Greyber, who is leading an interfaith trip to Israel in June, has graciously agreed to be our interviewer and will leave about 20 minutes for your questions to be addressed. Welcome back from your recent trip to Rabbi, and please take it from here.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the whole committee, Voice for Israel. We're grateful to you, and I just got a note that my dear friend, the Imam Abdullah Antepli, is online, and we want to just acknowledge his presence as well and say welcome. Minister Shai, I want to, as Bob said, I actually just returned from Israel on Monday afternoon. I was there for a week with my aunt Debbie, doing some comforting of her after the death of my uncle in December. Who lived in Israel, made Aliyah 40 years ago. And I do want to just add to what Bob said, that when I told my Aunt Debbie that I was going to be interviewing you this morning, the first thing that she said is, oh, during the Gulf War, his voice was such a comfort to us as they were in the safe rooms as the rockets were falling. And so, you know, you truly have been a voice of comfort to many Israelis, including my own family. What I want to do this morning is divide up. We have about a half hour together, and I thought I would divide up our time into 3 10-minute chunks approximately. And then, as Bob said, we'll leave about 20 minutes for Mike Ross to curate questions from the chat. During the first 10 minutes, what I would love to do is to just hear from you about what will be the focus of the ministry of the diaspora, of the diaspora ministry. The second 10 minutes, I would love to focus on anti-Semitism and the rise in anti-Semitism in the United States and the way that Israel can be a partner. And the third 10 minutes, I'd love to speak about the Palestinian issue, as you've said publicly, and understanding of how important it is for the next generation of American Jews. I want to begin the first segment of this time by just sort of celebrating a number of months ago, Israel approved a budget. It had been many years since a budget was approved, and there were many excellent things in that budget. For all of the coalition members of the coalition, and I think for the diaspora ministry as well. I'll let you speak to that. I will also say that personally, my friend Julie Platt, who was the chair of Camp Ramah in California, just a few days ago was announced as the new head of the Jewish Federations in North America. And she has spoken about how the American Jewish community is going to be working, focusing on overcoming and sort of moving past the COVID-19 pandemic, and also related to our second topic of anti-Semitism, working to help the American Jewish community, all of our institutions, to achieve security in our synagogues. And I know that Julie Platt and others here are excited to be your partner in helping to strengthen Jewish life in America. I'll say one more thing, which I'm very curious about. Unfortunately, and you and I have corresponded about this, the coalition has shelved the Kotel deal, which is extremely important for the majority of American Jews, for the Reform and conservative movements, in terms of feeling at home, in feeling that they have a home in Israel. And so I hope you can weave into your opening response some thoughts about how that can move forward in a more productive way. So, Minister Shai, tell us what's on the agenda, and what are going to be your focuses for the next year.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for hosting me on this call. I thank you, first of all, Bob and Mike, good friends of mine from the time, not too long ago, where I lived in with Rivka in Durham, and you were so nice to me, and I do remember those days vividly, and I'm ready to go back after my term expires 3 years from now, or 4, or I don't know how long. Daniela, thank you very much for hosting me in Beth El's shul. I didn't come too much, but I remember that shul as well. And I remember everyone. I don't see faces here, but I guess some of you know me. And so now, and as you know, I returned from Durham, from North Carolina, and I became a government minister, and my portfolio is governmental portfolio is Diaspora. This ministry was founded 20 years ago as a political compensation to one of the Israeli politicians, actually a very distinguished guy by the name Malkior, Michael Malkior. He was deputy minister for Diaspora at the time, because they were looking for to compensate him on his share in the labor victory in the elections at the time. But since then it matured a lot, I would say, and now it is an integral part of the government operation here, of the cabinet operation here. And I think there is no chance whatsoever that they will eliminate the ministry in any way. We are purposely focusing on the Jewish diaspora, on 8 million Jews living out of the country. And we try, I would say very carefully, to build bridges and to maintain them between Israel and the diaspora on both ends, in the diaspora and in Israel as well. Because as you all know, you know more about Israel than we know about you, obviously. We don't teach about the diaspora in school. And the average Israeli, if you walk in, you've just been to Israel, Daniel, but 8 out of 10 people in the street, in any street, were born in Israel. Israeli born, 78%, which means that for them, Israel is the Jewish world. They don't know enough. And even if they travel abroad, they wouldn't go and look for a shul or a Jewish community center or any other Jewish site. No, that's out of their mind. And that's bad. And we have to build in Israel and purposely look at this end of the picture, how to enrich their knowledge about Jewish life out of the country. We send delegations. We try to start courses in schools, in universities, in the military, in the police, in the public service, and so on. A variety of ideas. So the next generation of Israelis, those who have no longer relatives living out of the country, because when my parents moved to Israel, they had relatives out of the country. Many of them were exterminated in the Holocaust, of course. But even since then, there were always family ties between Israelis and Jews around the world. That, by the way, that naturally is no longer there for many of us. So we have to build bridges. What do I have in common with you, Rabbi Greyber? What do we have? We are both Jews, but would you feel something special? What can we talk privately or socially or intimately? No, because what do we have to say to each other? But if we meet frequently, and if we talk on Zoom, or if we exchange emails, and if we have something in common, then I feel very close to you, and vice versa. And that's what we are. It's not only between the two of us. It's between 7 million Israelis and 8 million Jews living out of the country, and knowing the difference between American Jews, South American Jews, the one in France, England, Morocco, and recently UAE. Okay, what do we have in common? What's going on here? And by the way, today I participated in a symposium in Ben Gurion House in Tel Aviv, and the symposium dealt with the what was the title? I don't remember, but it dealt with like 70 or 80 Israelis in a variety of organizations dealing with Israeli Judaism or something of that kind. I don't know, but what does it mean to be a Jew in Israel, in principle? And I quoted from Ben Gurion there because it was Ben Gurion House in Tel Aviv. And by the way, the same question that we ask you now and or you ask me existed there. He asked himself in 1957. So we have a budget, finally, as you rightly mentioned, 300 million shekels. I said it openly and publicly because I'm so proud of it. It's much bigger than ever. And we are now...
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, yes. Yeah, finally, we had a state budget. That by itself is a miracle. But for us, it opens a lot of avenues to foster and build relations. We do already. We are involved. Like in Durham, you can go walking into Chabad House or Hillel House, and you have programs about Israel. My students, the ones I taught the year before, they participate on both. So I know it from firsthand. I know it by myself. And we are covering hundreds of American campuses now. But we'll do much, and not only in America and elsewhere, because we feel that the young generation of American Jews has to be treated differently than other age groups in a Jewish community out of Israel. And we do more on that and other. We help family, women delegations to come to Israel. We sponsor them. Now we are building new programs with the reform and conservative movements in America to work with teenagers because we were told that this is the age group where they don't know enough, and when they get into college, they feel suddenly that they are ignorant about Israel, and they need to know much more, and so on. So I can spend hours on that. We do a lot. We don't do enough. We don't do enough. And last but not least is the attitude that I try to present both to the cabinet and to the Israeli public. It's time for us to give, not only to get. It's a revolutionary attitude. It's not what you used to give to us and you were very generous for years and you still are. It's what are we going to do for you? If Ukrainian Jews, the Jews in Ukraine now are in trouble, I'm asking myself, what am I going to do? And I prepare here a package for them once I know it's needed. Okay, this is something new. A package means a lot of goodies. I would not to be in a war and to get any goodies, but yes, they need us. They will need us more than that. And that's just an example. And we'll do it. We do it, and we'll do it more and more. We help education. We help teachers, principals. And for many Israelis, this is something new. They said, you are using our money to help Jews in the diaspora? And my answer is yes. We still need you, and we still have needs in Israel, urgent needs. But it's time to make this way two-way street and not only one-way street.
Let me ask you, I'm delighted, and I, as you and I have spoken about, when I spent a year in Israel, I wrote an article in Hebrew that ran in Haaretz about the need for this two-way street, and actually about the ignorance of many Jews of the diaspora, of the whole stories of the American Jewish community and many of the different histories, and predicaments of those of our communities. I want to ask you to just go a little deeper. Why is that? How do you answer Israelis who say to you, "You're taking my tax dollars and you're sending them overseas"? Why are you doing it? Why is it important for Israelis to have a sense of peoplehood?
It's a great question. So let me tell you, I would like to speak about Jewish values, about tikkun olam, about common destiny, but you cannot go to the supermarket and buy with Jewish destiny. It doesn't work. Don't try. So how do I persuade them? Strategic asset. You are strategic asset for the state of Israel. That language, most of the Israelis understand. When the finance ministry guys came to my office a few months ago to assess my needs towards the new budget, I told them openly, 2.5, 3 years from now, Israel and the United States are going to sign another 10-year memorandum of understanding, giving Israel $4 billion a year, and hopefully even more, even higher. I cannot promise you that we will have enough support in the United States for this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, because the public opinion in the United States, including the Jewish community itself, have number of reservations about Israel policies, mainly internally. With the Palestinian, you said something about the Palestinian? We'll talk about later on. I said that we identified from many surveys and research work that they were done in the Jewish community, there are new trends and new, I would say, kind of ideas now flowing around, which are not necessarily what Israel used to hear from American Jews as a whole, and especially young American Jews.
So to Israelis, you communicate, understandably, we're a strategic asset. It's important.
Right.
But you actually have a number of American Jews who are listening. So I'm curious, what do you say to us, to our community, why it matters for Israelis to have a sense of peoplehood?
Because we have a common destiny. Because being a Jew is something special. And even if we don't know enough about Jewish life out of Israel, we have to know what does it mean to be a Jew. And then we'll finally find out that we have a common history, that we all started from somewhere 5,000 years ago. And you know what? The state of Israel was incepted because of the Jewish diaspora. It's not only created by the few thousands or scores of thousands of Jews that used to live here. We were just 600,000 Jews. I say we because I was there in 1948. By now you know my age. But you were there. You were there by first of all, by sending Jews from the end of the 19th century and the 20th century to live in Israel. And then you started to help Israel financially to build the state before the state. It was you. Even if you don't know the history, even if you don't know those history, that's what made Israel. That's what makes Jewish diaspora so different than the Italian diaspora, the Greek diaspora, or the Russian diaspora. This is something different.
And I want to just acknowledge, and we'll move on to the next topic in a second, but Minister Shai, I think what you're saying reflects a real shift in the Israeli mentality, that for the first many years of the founding of the state, you would get into the cab in Israel. By the way, this still happens. The cab driver says, "When are you making Aliyah?" But it came from this attitude that saw the diaspora as essentially going to fade away. That the diaspora was a source of donations and a source of Aliyah.
The cash machine.
the cash machine, the kaspomat, right?
Kaspomat.
But the understanding was that the American Jewish community, other Jewish communities were going to fade away, and Israel would be ready and waiting to receive. It is a shift in mentality, and I think it is welcome to see to have this sense of peoplehood, to have this sense of shared destiny, that the diaspora is not going away, that in the language of the Hartman Institute, its most recent curriculum talks about two homes, right? There are more than two homes, but for the American Jewish community, American Jews feel a sense of home here in the United States, and God willing, feel a sense of home in Israel as well. Now, speaking about that sense of home, I'm going to shift us to the topic of anti-Semitism, because you have spoken publicly about wanting to help the American Jewish community to fight a rising surge of anti-Semitism in the United States. I want to say that I want to begin by saying that is it's wonderful and it's complicated, because unfortunately, anti-Semitism, like almost everything else in the United States, has become politicized, where people from the right see the anti-Semitism on the left, but they do not see the anti-Semitism on the right as being something to really be concerned about, and the vice versa. People on the left see the anti-Semitism on the right, but they have a blind spot. And when there have been moments, I even want to say that Israel, and I'm going to pick a specific one, when Ron Dermer attended the ceremony after the shooting in Pittsburgh, there were many, many American Jews who felt that was giving cover to President Trump and who were upset. They felt that Israel was coming into a moment that was a moment for the American Jewish community and representing the American Jewish community in a way that many people felt angry about, that wasn't how they wanted to be represented. And I pick that just as a moment to illustrate it's complicated, right? How do you help the American Jewish community fight anti-Semitism without what I think is a long-term, really existential issue that would be a grave mistake, is if Israel becomes something other than a bipartisan issue. And so how do you do that without it becoming politicized?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question, because for us, anti-Semitism is not a political issue. I know that maybe from your perspective, arguing with left and right in America, you ask yourself, well, where is it coming from, and what can we do about it? From my office in Jerusalem, beautiful Jerusalem, I should say. I look outside, I see how beautiful this city is. It's one thing. It's what happened in America. I specifically mention America now, but it's true about other states and other continents as well, that anti-Semitism is going up and up and up. And why? Of course, I blame the social media for that, no doubt. That became the greenhouse, for anti-Semitism. But it's not only about that. We all read the stories from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, from North Carolina to Boston. It happens in the streets of America. And I truly don't understand. And it's the last place on earth that I can preach the government what to do is America, okay? And I wouldn't do it anyhow. And I wouldn't blame America, and I wouldn't blame the president or the governor or any mayor for that. But still, there should be a reason why. What we can do from here, and we do, first of all, is to be on the front line of combating anti-Semitism. This is something I demand from my government. I'm not doing enough. And actually, formally, I'm the one supposed to combat anti-Semitism under the government, in the government. You won't know, and you don't want to know how small is my staff and how little we do. Obviously, we monitor the system, we monitor the social media, we produce reports, You don't want to see those reports, but it won't lead us anywhere. What do we do about education? What do we do about leaders around the world? What do we do about Holocaust denial? So many things we have to do. I would like to see a certain authority in Israel or a certain body, governmental body, state body, that will lead the campaign even from Israel to the world. We cannot expect you to do more than we do from here, right? So I know American Jewry is involved. I know your own organization, ADL, and so on and so forth. But the question is much deeper: is why? Why there's new anti-Semitism now in the year 2022? Why? I keep reading about it and I keep asking that question. I don't know. I don't know why. And but I believe, again, for Israelis, anti-Semitism is unknown word for many of them, because thank God, thank you, we don't experience anti-Semitism in Israel, right? We try to interpret BDS as the new anti-Semitism. Okay, so we know what BDS is, but then you have to show the link between the old anti-Semitism and the new anti-Semitism. Is Ben and Jerry or Unilever are really anti-Semitic, or they have their own reasons to boycott Israel? Why? And how can we respond to that? And using anti-Semitism on any given issue is also a big mistake. When someone, even in the Congress, has a certain criticism towards Israel, is not automatically anti-Semitic. No, I don't accept it. Because using this argument too much is like crying wolf, wolf all the time. It doesn't work.
And by that standard, the pages of Haaretz would be filled with anti-Semites, right? I know there's a tremendous.
Oh, there are enough Israelis in calling Haaretz anti-Semitic newspaper. Of course, we don't need anti-Semitics out of the country. They live here with us, next to us. Well, second door anti-Semitism.
I want to encourage. I'll take a moment, because we're here together, to encourage that. In this, I think the American Jewish community can, Israel wants to fight anti-Semitism, but there is a lot about anti-Semitism in the United States that Israel can learn from the American Jewish community. I certainly hope that you create a strong relationship. God willing, Deborah Lipstadt, her confirmation has moved forward, and she is obviously—
But she hasn't been confirmed yet.
Not yet, but God willing. And having a strong relationship with her and learning about the anti-Semitism in the United States that people face, I think, you can't fight it unless you're hearing what it is from the perspective of the American Jewish community. Let me tease out one question before we go to the Palestinian issue. You mentioned this for a moment, but I think it is really a question that many American Jews struggle with. Which is, how do you not cry wolf, and how do you tease out the difference between legitimate criticism of Israel and when criticism of Israel can be properly and rightfully understood as anti-Semitic? And I want to say that that's a key question for our communities. It's a key question for our communities, because we don't want to, we want to keep American Jews as part of the community. And part of that means that people need to be able to voice criticism of Israel without being accused of disloyalty.
What about the proposal that Bob told me about at the time by the Durham Council about Israel and BDS? Has it passed or not?
Well, that happened 3 years ago. It was a very, very painful moment.
Only 3 years ago? Okay, but is no longer on the agenda?
The mayor and the city council have changed. Whether or not it, and so has the police chief. Whether or not
that's good in politics. You see, Rabbi do not change. Only politicians you can change. Okay, because rabbis we are fine. So how do I identify? It's a core question. First of all, I have two answers. One is by the source, where it's coming from, by the context, and by the content. Then I can identify who says what and I can tell you, well, is it just a criticism towards Israel, or there's something inside or deeper that I can and I should expose? The second is, let's use my good friend Natan Sharansky's definition. It's very easy. It's actually start with D, like Daniel, but it's not Daniel. It's delegitimization of Israel, dehumanization, and double standard. Very simple. Good for you, for the Americans. Three Ds, it makes your day. But look at every piece of information, every speech, every allegation made with Israel, and ask yourself whether it's double standard, demonization, or delegitimization of Israel. If it falls under this very simple criteria, then we know where it is. In general, of course, there are variants. I welcome, honestly, any criticism to my country or towards my country, which is fine. We live in a democracy. You are a democratic country. There are another 25 to 30 democratic states on earth. That's fine. Other states is a different matter. If an American leader, Congress, senator, governor, black priest, anyone who has something to say about Israel, even if we don't like it, we should struggle with that because that's life. And we can come and explain and give our own version and our own response. That's fine. But if it falls under the 3 Ds, or if we know that this person or that context or that content belongs to something totally different, which is like BDS, like boycott Israel, divestment Israel, and sanctions against Israel, then that's anti-Semitism. But we have to be careful, as I said before, don't use anti-Semitism too much because you downgrade it.
And I think, the word can be used as a way of silencing people, and can be very heavy-handed in conversations. And more important, there are some times when people say things which are anti-Semitic or take on that tone, and where the most important thing that you can do is to use it as an opportunity for teaching and learning. I'm going to transition us to the final topic that I had, which is the Palestinian issue. And I want to maybe just connect it. In the last couple of weeks, there was the report by Amnesty International, which was, described Israel not only since 1968, but really in its founding as being an apartheid country. I would describe that as, I thought it was, the truth is I read part of the executive summary, and it was so one-sided and so imbalanced, it was difficult for me to keep reading. I would describe that as illegitimate criticism of Israel. And yet, something that I wrote down here that has been an issue over the past few months has been hilltop youth. These are settlers in the West Bank who are not only in unauthorized settlements by the Israeli government, but also have been reported to be doing terrible tag attacks against Palestinians, promoting violence, etc., that I think are deeply painful for the American Jewish community. And I want to, and those criticisms I think are legitimate. And I want to hear you. You've spoken publicly about how you want to, you understand the way that that Israel's occupation of the Palestinian people, whether we get into the territories or not, there is a group of people whose lives are being controlled. That is an important thing for the Ministry of Diaspora to confront in order to have a successful connection with the next generation of American Jews. And I just want to hear you, think through a little bit. How can we do that without sort of reverting to what I'll call haspara, which sort of, reverting to, well, here's why they're wrong, and here's why they're wrong, and here's why they're wrong. What are the plans for the ministry in moving forward on that?
Okay. By now, I'm a member of the Labour Party. And you also know that our former Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, was assassinated because he made peace with he signed peace with the Palestinians. We follow his way, which means that we are for peace and security. We want to change the order, security, and peace. We fully support the two-nation state for two people. And we will do everything we can, now and in the future. We are not going to change our politics, and we are not going to change our political way. That's where we are. That's the core of our ideology, peace and security for Israel. Unfortunately, first of all, the Oslo Accords, in a way, failed. And we have to find new leaders, even, I would say, on both sides. The present government, which I'm a member of, and I'm proudly served for, will not move forward on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or Israeli-Palestinian relationship, because we are 50% from center to left and 50% from center to right, proportionally. And the second half, not ours, believe that we should annex parts of the West Bank, and we should, and maybe the entire West Bank or Judea and Samaria, and find other arrangement for the people living there, Bennett included. On our side, we believe we should withdraw from most of the West Bank, let the Palestinians install their own independent state, but all based on security, sufficient security arrangements for Israel. No withdrawal without security. We were not able and we are not able to convince over 50% of the Israeli population to vote for us, and vice versa. Actually, between us, if there were some reasons, personal even reasons, and ideological one, before 8 months ago, it would have been a right-wing government in Israel at the helm now, and they would probably move forward unless the United States of America and the guy in the White House, the president, would tell them, no, guys, that's not something you can do. But otherwise, they would like to see. So a majority of the Jewish people, the Israelis, if it's based on them, I mean, if you ask them, they will support two-nation state, but in the elections, they vote for parties that actually suggest otherwise. I believe that as long as we are controlling the life of 2 million Palestinians, we have to let them live free and prosperous life as much as possible. I hate, as much as you hate, the pictures, the visuals I see, the images I see on television. Last night, there was a scene from Jerusalem in Sheikh Jarrah. I don't know if you saw it, with a boy, 19 years old, who is a young man with special needs, was trying to shout something or to demonstrate, and he was taken away by Israeli police officers. It was a shame. It was a shame. I couldn't see it. I myself could watch the scene. And there are similar ones. You mentioned the Hilltop youth. That's also a shame. They are Jews. They are Israelis. Sometimes we know who they are. They cover their eyes and faces, but we know who they are. They don't represent anyone in the country, including Bennett and Saar and Lieberman and all the right-wing parties that are sharing the coalition now with us. I don't believe they represent the people of Israel. I still believe that Israel is a moral state. I still believe in the moral of the Israeli Defense Forces, even if things like that one yesterday or others happened here in the territories. But I believe that as long as we control their life, it impacts our life. It impacts the values of the Israeli people. It impacts the young generations, in plural, of the Israelis living in the country. It impacts the relationship between us and Israeli Arabs. And that's why it's a miracle now that within this coalition, the present one, we have, for the first time in Israel history, an Arab party with 4 Knesset members. For the first time, we have an Arab, Israeli Arab as a government minister, which is also, and a Muslim was born, Israeli Arab Muslim was born, the other was chosen, selected yesterday for the Supreme Court. First time in our history.
And a Mizrahi woman as well.
And a Mizrahi woman as well, yes. And by the way, yesterday, another woman, a female from Nazareth, an Arab, was appointed as Israel Consul General to Shanghai. Okay? And the first question asked on radio today, on Israeli radio, was, what will you do when they sing the Israeli national anthem? What will you do? And just to confuse her. Nefesh Yehudi Homiya. We all understand what it means. She can't sing Nefesh Yehudi Homiya.
The Jewish soul yearns.
Translate it to English. I don't say, how do you say Nefesh Yehudi Homiya?
I got it. Go ahead.
A Jewish soul. And the same question should be addressed to 5 out of the 11 players of the national soccer team that are Arabs, Israeli Arabs. 5 out of 11. If you see them standing and the camera moves from one to another, 5 of them don't move their lips and sing, and the other 6 sing very strongly the national team. So you will notice that 5 of them are silent. But Daniel, they play very well. And they score goals for the state of Israel. And they are very proud. And you know what they do after they scoring a goal? They bow and thank Allah for that. You haven't seen that as well. You haven't seen that. They score for a goal for the state of Israel, which they are they're citizens of. Okay, Tracy, give me the word. The Jewish soul yearns. Okay, that's the. But seriously, with the Israeli soccer football players, the soccer players, they, what's that? Okay, tell Rivka I cannot talk now. Yeah, it's my wife. It's my wife, and you know what? The grandchildren would like to talk to me on FaceTime.
Minister, as a rabbi, I want to counsel you to make sure to get back to her call.
I know, but after 47 years, we are fine. I mean, I'm not running away, and she's not running away any. But seriously, I just give it. So I'd like you to know, and I know I talked not only to you because I see only you, Mike, now, and Bob, but many others. We are watching very carefully what the military and the police and the Shabak are doing in the territories. And we're watching them and monitor the operations. And if necessary, we take care of it within the government, within the Knesset, with this Supreme Court, okay? With the Arab member now, or with the first Mizrahi, Oriental or Sephardic member, and so on and so forth. So there are internal system that control but as you know, as I said before, the only solution is separation between Israel and the Palestinians.
So Mike has come on, and he's going to ask a few questions on behalf of the community. I'm just going to plant one little one in there, which is, Minister Shai, I think within the American Jewish community, there's a struggle to figure out how do we appropriately and responsibly try to strengthen those forces within Israel that we believe are fighting for Israel's democratic soul, without, honestly, in the American Jewish community being labeled as disloyal. And I think that for us, as a rabbi, I'm trying to make space within our community for people to be in relationship with Israel differently, and still be within the American Jewish community. Mike is going to shoot me if I don't. So, Mike, go ahead and give some questions from our panel.
I want to thank you, Rabbi and Minister Nachman. Your conversation has been so compelling and very illuminating on so many issues. I want to get right into the questions. We have a lot of them. We probably won't get to all of them. I want to first ask a question from Rabbi Gutman from Temple Emmanuel in Greensboro, and they were a kind sponsor for us today. And I won't read the whole thing, but he forms his question regarding the fact that the first 2 years of high school are very important in creating identity for young people. And he really asks the question, is there a possibility of creating a birthright-like program for high school students in the 10th and 11th and 12th grade?
Yes. Whose question was it?
This was from Rabbi Fred Gutman at Temple Emmanuel in Greensboro.
Okay, Greensboro, okay. Keep her in the Congress, okay? She's running again, my friend.
Oh, Kathy Manning is running in Congress.
I said her, you know exactly whom I mean. I don't want to interfere in American politics, but when it comes to Kathy, I break all lines. So Greensboro and Kathy are, okay. So don't forget her, please. Tell her I campaigned for her. I told her at the time, I met her 2 months ago in the Congress. I said, I'm coming and campaign with you, and even maybe I lose my position, but I would like you to be, again, to be reelected. The answer is yes, Rabbi Fred. We are now actually, there is a program funded by, from Atlanta, out of Atlanta, by Benny Marcus, $20 million. First 20, the seed money. Now we are joining the program. As I told you before, we are rich. We have a budget, not as rich as Bethel community, but we are fine. Yes, we join in, and we would like to encourage. We understand. So the program like that already exists, and we will encourage to add more. It's similar to Birthright. Birthright refused to handle the program. Now they regret, but it's too late. The program is already there, and you'll probably hear from them to bring kids not only from America, but from other, not from United States, from other states and continents as well. So sooner or later, it will take a few years. You will hear about that. It's called Route 1. Route 1. Yeah. So the answer is yes.
The moment that I can bring some of our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders to Israel, I will.
Not as young as 10 and 11, not 11, 12, a little bit older. That's they are too young. 11.
Grade, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Okay, grade. Yeah, okay. So sorry. Yes. The answer is yes, Daniel. Yes, the answer is yes. That's exactly what we are aiming for, because we were told that when they hit the campus or any campus, sometimes it's too late. We have to start this early education with them.
So let me ask another specific question you may not have an answer for, or be able to fully address. We're all riveted by the situation in the Ukraine right now. Do you know how many Jews actually live in Ukraine? And
yes,
can you tell us about any contingency plans to enable the Jewish population to emigrate to Israel?
Okay. We are very much in touch and watching the scene in Ukraine, not only because of the Jewish community, but because it's a global world issue. It's much bigger than just them. But we always ask, what happens. It's the elephant and the Jewish problem. Okay, so that's what we say. There's a big elephant, but what 200,000 Jews live in Ukraine, 200,000 most of them in 4 major cities. 15,000 Israelis used to live. 4,000 of the Israeli citizens left under the request, or even I would say order, appeal of the Israeli government. Only why 4,000? Because they are Israelis. Don't tell them what to do. They know better than you. We stay here as long as we want, okay? And if something happens, they will blame the government. Who they are going to blame? The US government, the Israeli government. Why don't you come to pick us up? Have you done it in Entebbe? Yes, so we can do it now as well. That's Israelis. 11,000 of them refused to leave Ukraine. Many of them actually live there almost permanently. They made Aliyah and returned to Ukraine, their own decision. Many live in Uman. They wouldn't leave Uman. Rabbi Nachman takes care of them. They won't leave Uman, and so on and so forth. With the 200,000, we are in constant touch. We know what their needs are. Chabad, the foundation, Friendship Foundation, Joint, Jewish Agency, and other organizations, Nativ, at least 5 organizations are involved, and we get direct reports from them. Also, we collected a list of needs that they will need. We have the financial resources to help them. Actually, we did that in 2014 when Russia took over Crimea. Yeah. And now they're going to be probably the same exercise again. If a war breaks out, we will start helping them. For the time being, we are very careful, but we keep the funds and we can do it right away. About Aliyah to Israel, first of all, we are again very careful. No country would like to see another country encouraging its citizens to leave the country. I mean, you see it from a Jewish perspective, but look at it from the Ukrainian perspective. You are my neighbor, you're staying or leaving? Because I've just heard on radio or television that someone from Israel said, all Jews are required or welcome in Israel. That's a source of anti-Semitism, isn't it? So we say it quietly. We carry the message to them. We don't want to say it loudly. If they choose to come, we are waiting for them. We already prepared contingency plans in Israel if they decide to come. A lot of contingency plans, believe me. But we don't want to carry a campaign on that because of the sensitivity. And by the way, bear in mind, there are hundreds of thousands of Jews living in Russia. This conflict between the United States and Russia, what does it mean when the United States is so much associated with Jews, with the Jewish power, with the Jewish bankers, with the Jewish media, the media owned by Jews, and so on and so forth. So you should be, again, that's a sensitivity, by the way, that I developed as an Israeli. It's different. Not every Israeli will get, but so many conversations with you and others, and so many times I've been engaged with you, I realized the different tone we have to use in a situation like that. What does it mean to a Jew who lives in Russia and suddenly his neighbor tells him, wow, your America now is imposing sanctions on us, and we have no food, or we have no energy, we have enough, but we have no spare parts for our tractor, or we don't have whatever you provide the Russia, or we have no way to purchase this or that in the world market because of the American sanctions. Again, to be careful in a situation like that is the first thing that we have to do.
So let me ask another question, which may be tricky for. This is from Madi Yanbari. He's a professor at UNC Pembroke. And he asks, Ambassador Dermer said that he prefers to invest in the evangelicals over the American Jews because they are a much larger block of American population. How would you respond to him?
We should invest in American Jewry first, as much as we can. We need friends. We welcome anyone's friendship. We have to maintain as good as possible relations with the evangelist, but the first priority for Israel was, is, and always be American Jewry. That was my answer to my friend Roadrunner.
So I have a kind of a philosophical question. I am very
By the way, who won the last game between UNC and Duke? I would like to know.
Duke.
Duke. I just wanted to ask the question because I knew the answer.
Yeah.
But I want everyone on the call to know the answer.
You just lost.
I was watching the game from Tel Aviv. It took me hours to find a pirate channel in order to watch the game because I've no subscription to any American channel here. But I finally was watching the game.
I want you to know that one of the biggest Duke fans is on this call, and that is Imam Abdullah Antepli.
I know Imam Abdullah very well. He's a great friend of Israel, and I happened to talk to him a few times while in Durham. And I thank you very much for your article, Abdullah, that you wrote recently, and for your friendship. I appreciate it very much.
So, I am very comforted by the fact that Israel sees a role in protecting the interests of the diaspora Jews. But I also recall that there was some outrage when Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu sort of took it upon himself to say that he speaks for all the Jews. And I want to know how you negotiate those poles of your obligation to the diaspora. Do you see your role as speaking for them like a pope speaks for the whole Catholic Church, or do you see? I mean, how do you draw the lines for yourself, or how does Israel draw its lines?
No Israeli is entitled to speak on behalf of the American Jewry. We can speak sometimes on behalf of the Jewish people as a whole. I mean, President Herzog, no doubt, is an expert on diaspora and on Judaism, and I would gladly welcome him any speech. But he is not. None of us is allowed to speak on your behalf. I speak. By the way, sometimes in the government cabinet meetings and even in media interviews on your behalf, if you forgive me. I try to represent you within the cabinet. During the corona recently, I said, I'm glad you said the corona as if it passed, it's still there, it's still even in Israel, but going down. I talked about those American Jews who would like to come to Israel and they were not allowed to. And I try to draw lines between Jews and non-Jews, which is very delicate again. But I said the relationship between Israel and the Jewish diaspora is not similar to the relationship between Israel and other non-Jews, because you used to come to Israel, you used to send your kids to Israel, Taglit used to come to Israel, Masai's come. We have so many programs, we have so many, and that makes the relation so, this is just a manifestation of the special relationship between you and us, because we started this conversation with talking with Daniel about what does it mean to be Jews on both sides of the ocean. And that's why I kept pressuring the government to open the borders, the airport for Jews to come to Israel under certain restrictions, but different than others. Now, finally, March 1st, the country is open. Everyone can come with kids, even they are vaccinated or not vaccinated. The country is open. So please come. We are waiting for you.